right, Shannon. Jordan was on a show with a bunch of atheists, Jordan Peterson, and I feel like on this, we ought to just do a quick episode on how that went. There was a few things that he went kind of viral for, and I believe there's just some terms that he was using that I wanted to discuss. But let me show you the clip real quick.
Okay.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
I guess since you said morality and purpose cannot be found in science, it would just depend on like what you're referencing. If you're saying a description of your psychological preferences would be considered within science, sure. But I don't think that you have to say that it comes from science in order to be like an atheist. As an agnostic atheist, I don't know if God exists and I don't believe that a God exists. And the only ones that I would really reject would be like the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good, perfect notion of God that plenty of Christians like prescribe themselves. So I guess
How is that relevant to this claim?
You're basing a position of morality and purpose in some like notion of God that isn't the same type of notion of God that typical Christians would prescribe. Your notion of God is
What typical Christians?
Yeah, typically when I talk to Christians, they say that they believe in an all-knowing.
How about Cardinal Newman, who defined God as conscience? He was a major influence on all of Catholic social theory. How about that Christian?
Sure. So do you believe in the all-knowing, all-powerful, all-good notion of God?
What do you mean by believe?
Do you think it to be true?
That's the circular definition. What do you mean
How
when
is
you
that
say you
circular?
believe?
How is that circular?
Because you added no content to the answer by substituting the word true and believe.
I said you think it to be true.
All right. So if
What's
you
a belief?
believe something, you stake your life on it.
What do you mean by that?
You live for it and you die for it. That's what I mean by that. It isn't something that you say. It isn't something that's associated with logical consistency. It's not declarative. It's not propositional. It's not a figment of your imagination. It's the presupposition of your attention and your action. And you're either fragmented, in which case you worship multiple gods, or there's some unity at the bottom of it that makes you an unstoppable force.
Okay, so you're saying that you don't believe something if you wouldn't die for it?
Not really, no.
Okay. So then,
How would you define belief? Something you say?
Can I explain? Like, I could believe it is the case that this pen exists, but if someone like threatened my life, right, I would lie in order to be able to save my life, right? Like, I think you would do that too. You wouldn't lie to save your
Don't be
life?
so sure.
You wouldn't lie to save your life?
How much do you know about me? I didn't lie to save my career. I didn't lie to save my clinical practice.
Would you lie to like save your children, your mom, your dad?
I don't think lying would save them.
No, can there ever be a circumstance logically that lying could save someone?
Yeah, and if you're steeped in sin, you're likely to live in circumstances like that.
I'll give you an example. If you're like in like Nazi Germany, and it is the case that there's like Jewish people in your attic and you're trying
I
to
know
protect
the
them,
example.
would you lie to like the Nazis? If
I
they're
would have
asking?
done everything I bloody well could, so I wouldn't be in that situation
you
to begin
lie?
with. It's a hypothetical, and it's
You
not
can't answer
answerable.
hypotheticals?
No, I can't answer a hypothetical like
What?
that because
Did
it's
you eat
far.
today?
Look,
Did you eat
don't
today?
play games.
I'm not playing a game. I'm just
Yes,
asking if you
you
ate
are.
it today.
If you present me with an intractable moral choice that's stripped of context and you back me into a corner, you're playing game. I just told you
Hypothetical?
I would do everything that I could to make sure that I'm never in that situation. By the time you've got there, you've made so many mistakes that there's nothing you can do that isn't a sin.
Being born in Nazi Germany and trying to protect people that you care about, like there could be a Jewish friend that you have and you want to protect them.
I think you should
have
just
them in
give
your
up on
attic.
that line of questioning.
Give up on just like trying to clarify your position? Because you
I
don't
did
like, are you like
clarify.
uncomfortable with me asking this question? It's just a basic hypothetical. Like I could ask you.
It's just a basic
Yeah, yeah.
hypothetical
Like,
where
like
you
if you-
put Jews' lives at stake in Nazi Germany. That's just a basic hypothetical.
Obviously, you would lie in that scenario to save their life, but you're like not trying to answer this question for some reason.
I just told you why.
Are you anti-fascist? Like, so you're
Why are
anti-fascist?
you asking that?
I was just asking, just clarifying. But like, okay, again, you're not answering this hypothetical because you know it shows that you clearly would lie to save
I'm
someone's life.
answering it in
Obviously,
a
that's
manner
not what
you
truth
don't
is.
find acceptable.
Obviously, 'cause I care about truth.
I wouldn't be in that scenario.
Obviously, right? Logically, because that's
No.
already happened. Like that's in the past. You don't have a time travel device. We're bringing this logical hypothetical up to show you that in some circumstances that do happen within the real world, you would lie to save people's lives. So your definition of truth isn't actually how we're typically using it. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to muddy the waters when I ask you, like, do you believe this? Do you think this to be true? So you don't actually have to answer the questions. And plenty of Christians don't like that because they clearly see that you don't really like want to be associated with
I can
Christianity with that
imagine
respect.
that I was in a situation where the best I could do as a consequence of my previous mistakes was to tell the least amount of lie I could manage. But that would likely indicate that I had made all sorts of catastrophic errors on my way there.
So
Right.
you would lie to save someone's life. So again, you do believe it to be true in that circumstance, even though you like lied in that scenario. So
Not
clearly that's
without
not
the
what you see to be true.
context that I put it in.
You were not willing to
I
die for it.
said-
You were not willing to let other people die for it. So that's not what you see to be true then, seemingly.
You're doing exactly what I said you were doing at the beginning of the conversation. You're generating an impossible, restricted, hypothetical with no precursors to back me into a
How is
corner.
it possible? Is there something contradictory about it? Nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Yeah.
Okay, so there's like a whole handful of things while I'm watching that. First off, belief versus knowing. And Jordan was saying, if you believe something, you stake your life by it. And my understanding of belief is it's that the highest capacity of the mind is belief because it's taking data points and assembling them into whatever the belief is, and you only believe it based on like the data that you've assembled in your mind. And Jordan being this incredible intellect, and by the way, I love Jordan. I'll talk about that later. But the mind is only capable of stringing together data points. So people believed the world was flat. People believed the Earth was the center of the universe, and you really are restricted by available data, and there's always a level of doubt because new data could come in. So you can't really say that you know it. And A Course in Miracles is deep to say to know anything is, I believe they say something like to know anything is to know everything, because to truly fully know one is. So if you look at like the scale of consciousness, Jordan Peterson, the highest that the intellect can go is 499 on the scale. Aristotle, Albert Einstein, there's a handful of others that were like 499, like their level of consciousness was like the pinnacle of mentalism. And Jordan, I'd say he's way high up there. And I feel like what he's trying to do is yield to a higher power. And for example, stating that the origin of morality, I've actually heard him before years past talk about scientific explanations like monkeys in tribes. If one of them becomes tyrannical, the next three biggest monkeys get together and they rip the other monkey apart. And that's true. And he was talking about how morality may have evolved. You know, that's the mind at work, and his beautiful explanations. I feel like the last few years people are saying he's losing it. I feel like Jordan's trying to yield to a higher power, doesn't quite know how to articulate it. And this is one area, because belief is a mind function and knowing is not accepted by academia, because if you say I, and also when we say knowing, there's gradients of knowing, but it's in that dimension of feeling. And we've talked about this before, that the word feel is also confusing because we think of like emotions and feeling as opposed to like, I know, something that I know there's a God. You cannot, or you cannot describe God or love or anything in that dimension with even words anyway. And so Jordan, I believe in this conversation, if this is one of the points that I was thinking about, he was using belief instead of knowing. And I believe if he knew this framework, he would say something like, to the degree that he is able to know anything, he knows there's a God, but yielding that he can't fully know that. And when he came in town, when he was first touring, like speaking like 9 years ago, I snuck backstage when Jordan Peterson spoke in Salt Lake. We were one of like his first stops. And I snuck the book, Transcending the Levels of Consciousness, tried to get it to him, but his stage manager intercepted me. And I handed it to him. And I don't know if Jordan even saw it. I'm sure everyone's throwing books at him all the time. But I've been watching him suffer on the level of he's trying to use the mind, which is, he has a beautiful mind, and maybe he's got some ego in it or whatever else, but you can tell he's suffering. So he's suffering immensely. He's got depression and he's had these crazy bouts, and it's because of this whole like spiritual side of it. I know he wants to get into there, but like with Einstein and others, I know that brilliant mind's got to be this like crazy hurdle. So before I tell you the next point, what did you? That's the belief in knowing. If you have a comment.
Yeah, I feel like watching Jordan Peterson. Again, I'm just intuiting into this. What it feels when I'm watching him is like he's getting stuck in his intellect. He's trying to use his intellect to describe something of the spiritual nature that's really hard to put, like you're saying, to articulate love fully. By actually putting words to it limits. He's trying to defend. It also feels like very much coming. There's like a lot of defense and provingness in that energy field that he's bringing forth, and trying to prove of a higher power or articulating, which actually energetically, when I'm listening to it, it's almost hard to like take in because it's energetically, it's like what he's trying to do. It's just like keeps hitting a wall. And what I would say that I'm seeing is that there's yes, that struggle of the intellect mind is feeling like, oh, it keeps hijacking this thing that it can sense on the spiritual side, but he's not fully surrendering to it. And so again, it's coming from this proving of, I don't know, did that answer any of it?
Yeah, well, he's trying to prove it academic with the mind layer, and he's not going to ever get there.
You can't get there.
And even if he were to ever, and if he were to jump over to the other one, which he probably wants to say, but he doesn't feel sovereign yet. We were talking about that earlier today. Is becoming sovereign in that area is really difficult. Like it's a really difficult thing to yield to a feeling instead of intellect. And here's a few quotes. Course in Miracles says, "In the kingdom, there is no teaching or learning because there is no belief. There is only certainty. God and his sons in the surety of being know that what you extend, you are." Another one from A Course in Miracles, the Holy Spirit is the Christ mind, which is aware of the knowledge that lies beyond perception. So again, if you look back at this other chart, where we have the varying levels that one might be operating from, their projection of the world, their life view, the way they project God or people around them, and their whole experience is tainted with variable levels of perception. And so your belief and everything that you or your knowing is constrained by your level of spiritual awareness. So again, once you actually were at a purest level of knowing you were, there's a lot of cool scriptures on that too, like knowing that they talk about knowing that you are a son of God and being granted into the sonship with Christ, joint heirs with Christ. Once you've gotten to that point, that's when you really know everything. Before that, there's always a little bit of like, I want to say I know this, but I don't know. So faced with like life or death situation, this guy, here's the other thing I want to bring up. So he puts him with a hypothetical, and there's a couple of problems with the hypothetical. One of them is that it's not a real, that could have happened, right? But it's not real. And so if you are going to make a decision about something and you're using just the mind, hypothetical is fine because you can look at data and you can make a logical choice. When you're going to make a decision morally or ethically, that's in the spiritual dimension. So you would not actually know what the truth is until you're in the situation, because in the situation, there are infinite layers of context that are required to to take into account before you could actually decide what the most loving thing to do was. And like in that example of a bunch of Nazis came in, and yeah, probably because they don't have integrity, why would I, I don't want to even do the hypothetical myself, because it's not something people can really answer if they're operating spiritually speaking, because it's not actually real. So there's no reason, and people get caught up in it all the time. They always try to have hypotheticals, but you can't actually. And you could probably reinforce that if you were trying. You can't give a reading on a hypothetical because it's not a reality.
Right. It's not truth. When you're talking about like, and what he's bringing up, and talking about the Nazis and stuff, it's putting it to that point. But like, if you were in a situation right now and it was life or death, and let's say Cannon was in here, you wouldn't think one thing at all, would you?
No.
No. And that's coming from the spirit. I would say just recently when I had my moose experience, like in that moment, not once was I like, where do I think I'm going to go into this place? It was an act of spirit, of coming in, of like honoring that. There's what I would say is in the difference between like beliefs and knowing. In a knowingness, there's no separation. There's no question. There's no gap in the energy field. So like, for my personal self, like my relationship with God is not what I think. It's a knowingness. It's a connection coming here from the spirit. I don't need actually putting any intelligent or like trying to put words to it actually limits that energy field. And so there's a difference when people are, like you said, of beliefs coming in. Well, here, I would ask you this. Like, we were just talking a minute ago before we started about marriage and stuff. And in both of us were just saying what our beliefs were when we first got into marriage or when we were younger, and thought that has shifted. There's like a different belief. So that constantly is changing. The knowingness, at least what I've experienced, is so pure. It's so in there. Like when I'm doing readings, there's not like a questioning in there. It's just like, it's.
So then I could show you other clips. I don't know if you want to see more. There was just it was almost like a bunch of hyenas. It kind of pissed me off because I feel like Jordan's done so much good. When I first was, actually before I kind of got all into the spiritual stuff, I did a degree in economics, and I was studying political theory, and I'd hear the only people that were like saying, these were kind of more conservative talking points, but the only people that were saying it were these provocateurs. So they would just completely discredit what they were saying because they were doing it in just such an asinine way, vulgar ways. And like, why can't someone just get on there and just say the truth like they see it and not make an ass out of themselves? And I was literally thinking like I wanted to do a podcast, but I had like hesitation, too shy or whatever. I didn't want to do it. Then I found Jordan, and I binged like hundreds of hours. I remember falling asleep talking, and he'd be on my TV, and I would have dreams like talking with him. And when he wouldn't answer me back, I'd be frustrated and wake up and realize I'm like talking to my TV kind of thing. But he provides the male brain, the logical brain, such powerful stuff. And I would love to meet him someday. And I feel like he's getting into the spiritual domain, but he has all this baggage of like, he's been so measured. Every word he's ever said, he prides himself on having it like backed up in academia and logic. And maybe there's ego in that too, but that's also this like, that's like making a god of reason. And a lot of people, and I've heard other people, not him say it directly, but I've heard other people talk about reason as the highest form of truth. So if you look at like the masculine feminine diagram where there's yin yang energy, the logic is great, but it's only like half of the pie. And that's partly why, again, we are divided as a country into these, and it's both like from the shoes they're sitting in, it's just depending on what you're wearing. If you get too cold and reasonable and you completely dismiss that other area, it actually goes into the negative polarities like we talked about, and vice versa. And we've experienced that. But Jordan, I see him trying to get balanced, and I feel like life seems to be catalyzing him towards spirituality. But then when I watch stuff like this, where he's trying to yield to God, it's admirable. And then I don't like seeing these guys gobble him up because, like, he's an amazing guy. And I don't know, it just kind of bugged me, this video. It kind of went viral, and a lot of the videos were like, oh, Jordan got schooled and all that stuff. And look, he's wrestling with something. And I'm not saying I know more than Jordan Peterson, but I'm looking at that thinking, shit, Jordan, would you have just like grabbed the book that I tried to sneak you like 10 years ago? Because I swear, man, like, if you would know how to articulate what I feel like he does know, but I don't feel like he just has the kind of framework to kind of talk about it.
Well, I mean, it goes back to too, like when, why Jesus was speaking in parables and stuff, to break out of that egoic mind, because it will entrap itself. Like it can get, like, I feel like when Jordan's talking, he's like circling back into his same thing almost. Mm-hmm. And he's, what I can pick up is like, he's sensing it. He's like, he can sense it there, but he hasn't fully surrendered to it because there's that fear of lack of control. Right. And that's scary, getting in that abyss. I'm not saying anything bad. I feel he's coming from a good place. It's just energetically when I'm getting in there, he keeps getting trapped in his own mind because it doesn't give the full picture. By its nature is dualistic. So it's like, instead of what he's trying, you can't, in those articulations, I don't know that you can intellectualize spirit or God or any of those things.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's the thing. So I just, again, this was just a little mini episode kind of designed to talk about the difference between belief and knowing, and see someone that I care about, even though I don't know him. I love Jordan, I love what he's doing, getting stuck in this, this concept. And it's important to know that nobody really, again, even people that know, even the things you really know, to really know it, give yourself some grace, because people, and this is a hard thing I feel like religiously too, is like people get up and they say, I know that this church is true, or I know that I'm a child of God, or whatever they say. And this is just a problem with human language, is like we don't really know. And we could be talking about the knowing dimension when we say those things. You could know those things because you do feel them, and that would still be the appropriate use of the word. But a lot of times it's just belief.
It's more belief,
or it's parroting what we heard someone else say. And then I'm listening to someone say this, and I'm like, well, shit, I don't know that for sure.
Right.
Like, how do they know that?
Yeah. How come I don't know that?
How come I don't know that?
Because it's a belief.
Yeah, and so if people are like, oh, I believe that, this is the true church, or I believe that this is that, I'm like, oh, that's cool what you believe. Like, but when they say like, I know, that's pretty declarative, and that's what I feel like Jordan was trying to say with belief, is like you stake your life on it, and like you don't really stake your life on beliefs.
No,
like,
you don't.
I don't believe, like I believe that. I don't know, sourdough bread's better for me than like other bread, but that could change, I don't know. That's a dumb example, but like, I don't know. Belief isn't so important. I mean, it's just hold as like tentative till maybe we have more information.
Exactly.
And that's how like life pretty much is.
Yes.
Always.
Because the data points are always changing. We're collecting more. We have more experience, like continually experiences. The belief is, I mean, like a lot of the work I do in the office is getting to people's beliefs and undoing them.
Yeah.
Like, because a lot of times they're set in and they're not the actual truth. Again, to that point. And the knowingness is so different than the belief. Like if we're like when it's truth information of coming, like, so when you're saying like, I know this is the one church, it should actually be said, my belief is this is the one church.
Yeah. Or it seems, one thing I catch with like neurolinguistic programming is, positive affirmations and things like that. And I'm careful to, and I could always do better, of holding things as this seems. Like if I was commenting, especially like I have read some deep spiritual truths, but I don't personally, some of them know it. I've just read about it. And then I can comment, well, it seems to me for like what I've read, or it seems that this is the case.
Right.
Until such day that I have experienced it and it's really coming from a knowing, then I could start seeing the knowing because I've experienced it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's the experience. So, like, for instance, if I was going to pose this question, do you believe you love Margaret, your dog?
No. I've experienced
because
that much.
You know, meaning like you just know. It's like not a question. It's just like there's a knowingness. There's no and in that there's no separation. Again, that's what I'm trying to articulate. There's no gap in there. It's an instant. No, like it's not something I have to think about. I know it. I love her. It's an expression. It's something that I've felt and have had. There's no question there. Is that? I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, some things are, and that's what I'm saying. The use of the word still appropriate because it's coming from that dimension. But even when it's coming from that dimension, it's still like, do I stake my life on? I don't know. That's not even a good. This is where the stupid hypothetical thing happens. Right. But so I won't go down that rabbit hole. But no matter what I love, Margaret, the question, by the way, in the knowing domain that you have to answer in life on the daily is, what is the most loving thing to do for all involved? So in a hypothetical scenario, you're going to know that you could try to do that in the mind, but you're going to know if it makes sense for me to die in this moment for these people or lie or whatever it is, that's going to come from that knowing dimension. And not everyone has access to it, but the deeper access you have to it, the more you'll know, and you'll be able to make decisions. Like the moose charged you and you instantly knew to do this and do that. And that's not even,
I wasn't thinking.
Right.
And two, it's like, what I would say is the pureness. And again, there's no questioning in there. It's not going into a belief is coming from your intellectual thoughts. Again, it's something from experience. It's the data points you collected. But again, your belief could be totally different than my belief and Joe's belief down the street, whatever. But a knowingness is coming from this place where there's no question. It's not a thinkingness. It's just a know. It's just there. And like, you don't, I would just tell you in the energy field, the way it comes across is zero gappage. Like the thoughts are like, they kind of are like, the knowingness is just this very strong, there's unwavering in there. It's coming from an experience, not a thought.
Yeah. And one area where this somewhat related is that when I was in this like Facebook group, this non-duality group, and it got so annoying because everyone was just being so extreme to dismiss everything because of this highest truth that there is no table here and there is no camera, there's no podcast happening right now. And it gets so damn annoying after a while because it's like, yeah, okay, it's true at that vibration,
right? But what is
I hate to break it to everyone on this Facebook group, nobody here is enlightened. Arguing about like these things, I'm like, for hell's sake, like
or their asses wouldn't be here.
Yeah, you sure as shit wouldn't be on Facebook.
Yeah,
commenting
or even on this earth plane because you'd be so enlightened that you'd be on the other side. Like
totally.
That's what's so entertaining.
Totally. So I'm like, okay, so while we are going through this belief and knowing thing, have a little bit of grace on yourself, understand that. And stay open to it because what you think you might know, it takes maybe a near-death experience, some crazy experience, and all of a sudden you're like, holy shit.
Totally. Well, what a great example you just brought up.
Yeah.
Like, talk about near-death experiences. What an awesome group of people to talk about.
Yeah.
Because there's so many that have had these experiences, like, and you'll hear of like surgeons and doctors and they're like, yeah, I didn't really think that much of God and like wasn't really against it, just didn't think that much of it, right? And they're thinking, they have these experiences and they come back unwavering in the sense of they have a knowingness. They are undoubtingly like, this experience happened. I have zero fear whatsoever, right? again, those people have had experience. It's not something they're thinking about. They've had an experience of it. There's no question. It's no different. Like again, if an easy one is just like our relationships, there's no question that you don't love Kane. Like you love him so much that it's not a thought. You would go out and put your life on the line for that. And so it's not a belief. If it's like, and we were talking earlier about some of the stuff like in this mission, it's like, well, would you die on the hill for this? Heck yeah, because there's no question. It's not something I'm thinking about. It's embedded in my knowingness. And it's like, this is embodied in a part where there is no questioning whatsoever.
And we'll talk about it we've talked about it in past episodes, and we'll be harping on it forever, that part of the getting into the knowing is through what's called mysticism, where you, instead of working in the mind layer, you're going for experiences, typically altered state. I'm not really referring to psychedelics, but things like seeding your dreams and meditation. And there's all these different avenues to access it, where you're not getting the information you're not like parroting the information from someone else, and you're not which I'm not saying that stuff can all be quite helpful, but if you have to hold it all as tentative until you have experientially, like, you know it, and then moved it into the knowing domain. So it is helpful to like read about and hold some tentative things and meditate on them and contemplate on them, and then the universe, I feel like, works such a way that, oh my gosh, like let's say the principle of there are no accidents, and then some wild thing just happens, and you're like, there's no way that could have been random, and then that reinforces. Then you're moving into, I read about this thing and I just experienced there are no accidents, and I start holding it in the knowing dimension. Mm-hmm. And if you start doing that with all of if you can move beliefs, challenge beliefs, because some of them are just straight up wrong or not fully true, but if you can hold them as tentative, that way you can allow them to like solidify into the knowing, or to like maybe fall apart, and then you reconstitute something better.
Great example. Great way to put it. Because when you were just saying that, it made me think of like, right now, if you were like, Shannon, do you believe in spirit? I'd be like, yeah, I know there's one there. But at the beginning, I was like, I think there's one there. And so it was in this tentative space of like, I can sense it, but I haven't had enough experiences to distill it into my knowingness of like, yeah, this is truth. Like, this is happening. And that's what I would also say. Knowingness is tied to like an absolute truth, which is not a thought. It's like, right. It just is. So in that process of like how Sean would refer to it as the cosmology of oneself, it's taking these things. I take a lot, and I teach clients, like, take something. What's your viewpoint? How has your experience been with it? How do you really think about that? What is the outside world telling you? But again, a lot of it comes into how has your experience, how have you felt, and then you instill it in.
And one way to get into this area is when you begin saying things about how you feel about it, then you're operating from how you feel about something, which is in that dimension. Anytime you say think, it's probably not very valuable information.
Right.
Because you're offering somebody what your egoic brain has formulated based on data. And that can get interesting maybe with like really, really high IQ people. But even then, it's like, what ultimately matters is how you feel. And that's neurolinguistic programming. So if you catch yourself saying think, that's kind of a swear word. If you're really wanting to move into kind of knowing area, at least that's been my understanding and experience so far.
Yeah, constantly. Because again, you don't have to think if you love somebody.
Right.
You either do or you do. It's like, and mostly it's like, yes, I love these people, but it's like, no, I love, like, there's no question. There's, again, zero gappage in it.
And what you're going to do in a given situation, you can sit there, well, I think this, and I think that, and I think that. And that's where we all get stuck. I get stuck there still all the time, but I know about this other dimension. And so part of the motivation is so I don't have to sit there and think through a bunch of like stuff that's to make a decision. I'd rather just come and go, oh no, I know this feels like the loving thing to do. This feels like the right thing to do. It feels like this is the right.
It
the right
feels
answer.
solid.
Yeah.
Instead of, yes. Because when you get into the thinkingness, like even when I'm working with people, it's interesting because I can see it energetically. So it's like, I'm not even necessarily, I am listening to the words, but a lot of it's energy. And so I'll see them and they're like, they'll try to think their way out of something.
Yeah.
And they'll like, and then they'll bounce to something and they'll get to something. And then they're coming to me and they're like, well, yeah, but what about this? And I'm like, yeah, what about that? Because now you
Yeah.
have this way or this way. And they're like, oh, okay. And so then it's like, we'll get into that. Like, how are you feeling about that? Right. And then there's this all of a sudden, like, well, actually, I know I don't like that, actually. Well, oh, wait, you just said a knowingness because it's coming from a different place. And so a lot of it is, and I love using this in the office all the time, it's not what you think it is,
Right.
because it's not. There's a whole nother part of knowingness what's going on.
When you pay attention to what the mind's actually doing, it's doing what they did to Jordan. It's thinking in hypotheticals. Well, what if they end up cheating on me, or what if they do this? Well, that's just not. You're never gonna feel about that because you're only in the thinking area. You couldn't possibly have a feel. So, all the reality that's happening right now in this moment. There is a knowing about what the right thing to do in this situation is, rather than simulate all these mind exercises, which are completely unknowable and never will be knowable because
And
they're
exhausting.
fake and exhausting. And unfortunately, that's the rat race or the mind race that we're, generally in. So
Totally. It's the monkey brain. And so if you can start training yourself to come into a place, this is why I tell people a lot of times in the beginning of this practice is start witnessing your thoughts, start taking inventory. And when you start doing it, you're like, oh my, I can't trust these guys.
yeah.
Another thing, like where I've brought this up in here before, I brought it up. I had a new client in today and I was bringing it up. And she was having a hard time. Like, I don't know if I should trust my thoughts or this feeling I keep having, right? It was so great. So then I was like, okay, well, let's get into that. When have you, because a lot of times when I'm working with people already know. They just don't trust it. Mm-hmm. They'll go in hindsight. They're like, well, I actually already knew. Well, what part of that was telling you? Not your thoughts. It's this part. And so like I pose that question oft a lot. I'll ask people, when have you ever listened to your gut, which is usually, it's a knowingness, right? That just comes in. It's not a thought. It's like, oh, a gut, like, when has that ever served you wrong? I have yet to have one person give me an example. And then when I'm like, how about your thoughts? How about your beliefs? When you've listened to those, how has that led you? They're like, oh, I mean, before I even finish, they'll be like, not good. And I'm like, okay, well, right there. It's different. So even in that practice, there's this part where there's a deeper part of us that is actually way more aware of what's going on than the mind. And so when you start shifting out of that to go into a knowingness, again, I would just tell you energetically, and a lot of when I'm working is how I'm basing things off of the knowingness. Like if I go off of the thoughts, like I just said, it's a shit show and we can spiral anywhere. And think about how many times people like get in conversations and they'll go in this way and then they'll get you in something and then they'll U-turn it into another way. Like it's just, and I'm not saying thoughts aren't bad. It's just when we're talking about beliefs and knowingness, there is a huge difference in that.
Yeah.
I would always put my money on knowingness over beliefs.
Yeah. Well, with that, thanks for listening, everyone. Feel free to comment if you got any experiences with belief and knowing, but we just wanted to give a little shout out to Jordan. We love you. Sorry you got to put up with some of that nonsense, and hopefully people give him a little bit of grace because, man, that guy's really dedicated himself to serving, I feel like, the highest good, and it seems genuine to me, and it seems like he suffers. So I just wanted to kind of defend being one of his fans, just wanted to defend him a little bit on the podcast today. And anyway, love all you guys, and thanks for listening.
Keep floating.
Yeah.